Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Just Another Esports podcast. Once again, you're joined by me, your host, Nicholas Shady Bacon, and my co-host, Mr. Kevin Hubris. We haven't had any events. I was about to say this past weekend we had yada yada event, but we haven't. We're still waiting on those, and it sounds like we might not get our first event until February. So it's been unfortunate that we might not get anything in January, but this episode we are going to dive into the finalized, or at least temporarily finalized, announced rosters that we do have for all these teams. We're going to play a fun little kind of word game with that, and we're also going to be giving our rankings of these teams all the way from S to E. That's all we got room for in the color palette, so I don't think any of us are going to have any F tiers, but if we do, we'll just don't even bother having them in the CDL at that point. I assume if there's an F tier team, but that's kind of going to be the rundown for this episode. And so to start it off, we're going to go through each of the rosters and play our little word game where we're going to give one word to kind of describe the roster, and then we're going to kind of maybe elaborate on why a little bit. And so we'll kick it off with the Atlanta FaZe roster, which is Simp, aBeZy, Cellium, and Arcides. So I'll pass it over to you, Kevin. What was the word you chose to describe this new FaZe lineup?
The word that I have to describe this incredible Atlanta FaZe team is dominant. And I don't know if I had to go into that too much because this team is just electric. You cut down two of your players that arguably performed a little under where they should have, and then you add Arcides, who played out of his mind last season, like absolutely out of his mind last season, with Chicago Huntsmen. He wanted to switch over to the main AR role, so he just went to a FaZe. I mean, I really don't see how this team is going to lose that many games. They are just going to dominate all season. This is an incredibly powerful roster with some of the best players in the Call of Duty League.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Dominant. Maybe it's a little too ahead of kind of where we're at in the season since they haven't really played anything outside of maybe some of the charity tournaments here and there, and then scrims. I decided to go with upgrade. And so It's hard to really say that FaZe could upgrade from last season with Priesta and Major Maniac on that team. But I think Arcity is definitely kind of a clear upgrade into this roster. You take it, you kind of trim down some of the fat of going from 5v5 to 4v4. And that's not to say Major Maniac or Priesta are bad players. They're obviously not. They're amazing players. Priesta was definitely probably the star player on the 100 Thieves roster from the Black Ops 4 season. And Major Maniac was one of the star players alongside Dylan Envoy on that Genji lineup during the Black Ops 4 season as well. And so, but bringing in Arcides, who's focusing on being a sole AR player, they didn't really kind of have that. You had Cellium, who's a bit more of a flex. Major Maniacs, also known more as a flex player. So they didn't really have a definite AR player on their roster last season. And so Arcides coming in as a pretty prolific AR, having dominated kind of the scene for the past couple of years, or being at the top of his game for the past couple of years, moving into that roster, and then also having worked with Simp and aBeZy all the way to a world championship just 2 years ago. I think this is definitely a clear upgrade, and that's kind of an amazing thing to say simply because of how stacked the Atlanta FaZe roster was during the Modern Warfare season.
Yeah, absolutely. And to piggyback on that just a little bit, I mean, you're 100% right. It's kind of incredulous to think that there was an improvement made to this FaZe roster, seeing how in every single tournament they played in, they hit the grand finals. Every single one, from the beginning of the season to COD champs. And now we have to see how these guys are going to play well together and how they're going to transition over from 10s to 8s. But honestly, I don't see this team losing very often.
No, and we'll be able to see them against every team in the league quite frequently, which is very, very nice to see thanks to the format update. Moving on to the next team in the alphabet, we got the Dallas Empire with the lineup of Shotzi, Hook, Illy, and Crimsix. Obviously, Clayster's now on the New York Subliners, and so this is the four-man roster for the Dallas Empire with Rambo returning as the coach.
So yeah, I guess my word for Dallas right now is pressure. I think they have a lot of pressure on them to replicate what they just did, and who knows? They possibly could. You drop Clayster, a known contender and a back-to-back champion for the team. It was only he was the only one that made sense, and I think even he recognized that he was the only one that made sense to drop as they went from 10 to 8. Um, but you still have a championship roster there, and they know that, but everybody expects that out of them. And who knows how well they're going to perform coming into this season. Like I said, it was 10, now it's 8. You got rid of a pretty integral piece to your roster, and we'll see. I mean, I have good faith in them, but at the same time, I still think there's a lot of pressure on them to perform really, really well, and they have to feel it at this point.
Yeah, no, that's a really good word. I like that one. So I decided to go with growth.
Okay.
So Illy and Shotzi, this was their first year playing the past year, the Modern Warfare season was their first year as Call of Duty pros. And going from year 1 to year 2, there's definitely going to be a lot of growth. And with the absence of kind of Clayster in this roster, so you kind of have Crimsix as the hard-on vocal leader kind of for this team, the not dictatorship, but once I think like when you had those two leaders in Crimsix and Clayster acted kind of as the middleman between kind of the younger guys and Crimsix, who once the game played, kind of how he pictures it in his mind. And he's got a great lineup here to do that. I mean, from who talking on the podcast, the Eavesdrop podcast, about kind of Illy's mindset to the game, staying like shooting bots since like 6 a.m. or up until 6 a.m. when they had to like leave to the venue or something, simply because like he just wanted to win so badly, and he couldn't sleep, so he just decided to head over to a friend's house to shoot bots for 6 hours straight or whatnot. And then Shotzi's obviously has experience in other titles, being a Halo pro for a number of years and winning championships there. But I think like the player that I'm looking at the most, and I think this player grew a lot in the prior season as well, is Hook. Hook grew a lot from having Crimsix and Clayster on that Dallas Empire lineup, and I think he's going to continue to grow, and that growth is going to be necessary for this Dallas Empire lineup if they want to be successful with the absence of Clayster. Hook is definitely going to be the middleman kind of between Crimsix and some of these younger guys, even if they do share a very like mindset. Just only focusing on winning and doing everything they can to win. I still kind of see Hook as the glue for this roster, and so I think we're going to see a lot of growth in Hook this year, as well as some of the younger guys on that roster who are going to be moving into their second term as Call of Duty professionals.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. This team will do well next year. I'm not saying that they won't do well this coming season. Um, and I like your choice of word too.
Alrighty, well, down on the list, the next team up is Chicago Optic, hosting a lineup of Scump, Dylan Envoy, Formal, and Dashy, with Sender returning as the coach once again. So for this one, I'll start this one off. I went with tipping point. It's not a single word. It's
I was
more
about to
of a
say cheater.
phrase, so to say. I did that for a couple of these. I went with
All two words. I
yeah.
guess you make the
I
rules.
think the most I have here is I think 3 words, but one is just a connector. But so tipping point is the word I went for this Optic Chicago roster, and I certainly think at some point in this season they're going to hit it. Um, you have a lot of personalities on this lineup, and that is something that Hex has admitted that Optic Gaming has been plagued with throughout kind of their whole inception. And so at a certain point in this season, something is going to happen and something's either going to click or it's going to implode. And I think we're going to probably have to look at Formal potentially to be that guy to take the reins, as he did back during kind of the
IW
IW
season, yep.
era. And I mean, you have Dylan Envoy on this team who's more than likely, I would say, probably the best player on the roster, at least currently. This is just based off scrims. Scrims don't mean everything, but they give a small evaluation of kind of how players are performing. And he's been kind of the vocal leader for this roster. You lose Arcity, who was also an extremely vocal leader during the past season, along with he was kind of that pair with Dylan Envoy and being the vocal leaders for the team. And so you're going to have to see someone else kind of step up to fill that void that Arcity's left behind. And that's probably more than likely going to have to be Formal at some point. And I think that will occur when they hit this kind of tipping point that I predict occurring within the roster.
So you think they're just going to come out the gates and kind of have to be lagging behind just because they need to figure out what the leadership looks like and how to communicate in order to be a professional team until this
no,
quote
not
unquote tipping
necessarily.
point?
So at the start of the game, however, the start of the game, at least for not the start of the game, but the start of the season is going to be later this season than it was in prior seasons. We kind of see this with these optic rushers. They start out hot, then they start to fall off, and then they kind of pick it back up towards the end, but it's a little bit too late. And I think that's kind of going to be a similar thing that we see with this iteration of the Chicago Optic roster. Is it's going to have a good start. Then once teams start to figure them out, start to look at them a lot harder than they might have before the start of the season, they're going to hit this tipping point where they either will continue up or that will have been their climax for the season and it's all just downhill from there.
Yeah, I mean, we could definitely see that. I have a little bit higher hopes for Optic than that. I mean, they've been doing this for quite some time. But the word I chose for Chicago this year is content. I think that right now they are at this kind of what's the word for it? They are at a point in time where the videos and all of this content that's coming out, all the social media stuff is so pivotal, and that's what you need in order for an org and a brand to succeed. And Optic's always been like that. I think this year is the year that they have 4 really likable personalities throughout Optic gaming history. I mean, who doesn't love Seth Abner? Formal's always been, one of the goats for Optic. Dylan Envoy seems to just he seems to just vibe along and kind of do his thing. And Dashy, I mean, Bruce has been, gosh, he's fan favorite in Black Ops 4, and it's great to see him back. So I think that content is going to be one of those things that's going to be focused on a lot, and you can already see it with what Optic's been trying to do. So for anybody who doesn't know, I think we've said this a couple times on the podcast, but Optic was the only one that came even close to breaking even for their first year, or Chicago. It was the Huntsman then. But I mean, right now, I would imagine that Hector's going to do anything in his power to make sure that he can generate as much money as he can with this kind of roster before Seth retires or something like that happens. Before there's a big change. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but who knows what's going to happen at the end of the year? If they all get a ring, who knows? Scump might just be like, you know what? I think I've done enough, and that might just be it, right? But for now, this season, I think a lot of the focus is going to be on the content, and who knows? Who knows where that'll take them?
Yeah, no, content's always been something that Optic has excelled at throughout their years, while also being relatively decent at Call of Duty. So content's definitely a word to describe their roster. I'm surprised you honestly didn't go with that for the 100 Thieves roster, but there's probably a bunch of other good phrases or words we can use to describe them. So we'll move on to the Florida Mutineers. Their lineup is Havoc, Awakening, Skies, Slacked, with Ricky Atura returning as the coach. So for this one, I chose a little short phrase. This is my longest one. It's 3 words.
Oh,
I picked filling the void. And that is going to be Slack's role pretty much this entire season. There's a huge shoes to fill with the loss of Pharaoh.
yep.
That Slack is now coming into that role for this team, as well as he's been kind of the leader on teams in the past. And I don't know how vocal kind of Pharaoh was within this roster. I know Havoc's definitely one of the more vocal players, and I
Right.
don't know how vocal Awakening or Skies is. And so Slack has to not only fill the shoes left behind by Pharaoh, but he also kind of might have to plays slightly second fiddle in the kind of vocal leadership role under Havoc. And if they can feed off of each other and work very well together in kind of being the two vocalists on the two kind of leadership people on this team, then they can definitely kind of turn some heads throughout the season. This can be a very scary lineup, but like pretty much this whole season is just going to be based off like their performance for me is going to be based off how well Slack can kind of fill the void left behind by Pharaoh.
Yeah, I mean to piggyback on that, my one word, not 3, was sadness. I think that that's going to carry a lot. I mean, it's really hard not to, or really hard to talk about this without getting choked up. But I mean, Pharaoh was such a huge part of that roster. He took him to some serious events, and he was a pivotal role. Not to mention that, not only was he a good teammate, but he was a good friend with all these guys. And once they start to get back into the swing of things, it's going to be so hard not to get reminded that he should have been there this season. He was like, the Florida Mutineers roster was going to look disgusting this year. Like, you didn't have to play a 5th man? All right, perfect. They had 4 great ones right there. And now they lost Pharaoh. It's just really sad to see that this team that could have been so great this year, I mean, they're nowhere near as relevant.
Yeah. Well, with those words said, I think we'll move on to the London Royal Ravens lineup, which is a lineup of Shawnee, Alex, Dylan, and Zero. And the word I chose for this was safe. This is a very safe choice for the London Royal Ravens. They're all European players, most of them originating from the UK. You got Shawnee, I can't remember Shawnee's origin. I believe Northern Ireland, and
Something like
then
that.
Dylan's like Wales or
Right.
something along those lines, I believe. And
They
this
were
is
all from
just a
the UK,
very
I know that.
yeah, this is just a very, very safe pick. Like they have Shawnee, who kind of last year he really showed up during champs in their last couple events, and he's just a very easy person to kind of work with in a roster, as maybe not so much with Scraps and Wuskins, who, as like whatever the rumors were playing in Warzone tournaments instead of prioritizing kind of the team. These are all players that are going to prioritize the team 100%. Shawnee, Alex, Dylan, and Zero. They're all going to prioritize the team 100%, and they're going to give their 100% to kind of whatever roster they find themselves on. And so I think this is a very safe kind of lineup for the Ravens. They didn't really have to change too much. They already had Dylan, Zero, and Shawnee. They just bring in Alex for this lineup. Scraps and Wuskins are gone, and they can kind of probably feel very comfortable that this is going to be a okay roster for many seasons to come. Like these players throughout like all of the titles, they've never really been bad players. They've just not been S tier players in certain games, but they're always kind of around that middle of the pack. And so I think this is a very safe choice for the London Royal Ravens.
You know what? It's funny. Like, I think we're gonna have our first disagreement right now because while you do think this is a safe roster, and I can definitely see the points you've made there. The one thing that will be important is, or I guess the one thing that like weighs heavily on my mind is getting rid of a top 5 player like Weskins. And I understand like the conflicts with personalities and everything like that, but a player with that talent, dropping him and dropping his brother Scraps, The one word that I came up with is suspect. It's pretty sus what London's doing right now. I don't really. It's just I don't believe in them right now. I really don't. The clutch factor probably isn't there still, and if anything, it's gonna go away. So how many times are they gonna drop their game fives this year? We saw that I don't know how many times last year. I could probably count them on. Probably couldn't even count them on two hands. How many times they dropped a game five?
Yeah.
Um, and when you get rid of key players, superstars like that, your clutch factor just goes away with it as well. And I mean, you can be the best team out there, but at the end of the day, you got to have some electricity in you. You got to have some sort of fight. And I think that getting rid of Weskins and Scraps is pretty suspect in my mind. I don't know how it's going to affect the roster. I mean, hopefully the vibes are good and they can just move forward with good team chemistry and do well this season. But I mean, I have them ranked pretty low, and it just comes down to this. I just think it's pretty suspect what they did.
Yeah. So suspect in like kind of what way? So like keeping Weskins and Scraps, I feel kind of adds a lot of volatility to kind of the lineup, especially if there's only four people on the roster. At that point, literally the Twins make up half the roster, and I don't see them realistically having in would. I mean, they could have moved just Shawnee back to kind of the sub position, the substitute position, and kept Dylan in zero. But
Dylan Zero, Weskins, and Scraps would have been, in my eyes, that would have been a great roster. And I understand like the chemistry and everything just wasn't there. But I mean, Weskins didn't even get picked up by a team, so maybe I don't know something, which in itself is quite suspect. Like, why is
I think
somebody
it
who we
also might
regarded
be a lot of people might have just been looking at him as playing kind of that octane role for the team.
right?
And that's kind of why he looked as amazing as he did. I don't think that's the full reason. I think he honestly did have a really good season, but that was one good season. And he's been a pretty average player, I want to say, in kind of all the other titles.
Right.
It's only really been Scraps that people have been talking about up until Modern Warfare, where Weskins was kind of the talk of the town.
Um, I mean, I like I said, he was a top five player last year. Um, we ranked him as highly as that. Plenty of other content creators ranked him high. Other organizations took him in high regards. He was arguably one of the best snipers, if not the best sniper, through the Modern Warfare season. And in a game where snipers are OP, you would imagine that there would be some spot on some roster for a man of his caliber. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. There's always been personalities, and you just have to figure out how to manage that. That's what you have your org do. So the fact that London is willing to just give up a top caliber player, like I said, it's just pretty suspect to me.
Okay, I can see that. Moving on to the LA Gorillas with a lineup of Vivid, Apathy, Assault, and Silly. Coaches Bevels, Ricky, substitutes Mental and Chino. I went with Reunion, and it's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit self-explanatory. This is three of the four guys that were on the World Championship Evil Geniuses roster in the previous 4v4 title of World War II. And so, yeah, it looks like the Gorillas are like that seemed like kind of a recipe for success back during those days. And so we'll just bring them back for a little bit of a reunion tour, see if it works. If it doesn't, oh well. That's pretty much the mindset I see the Gorillas going into this season with.
I think that's a pretty apt description of what's going on here. I think they're trying to take a formula that they knew worked at one point, and hopefully they can return to form with it. I will say that my word for LAG is valley. I believe that they are at the bottom of a valley right now. Fitting because they're in Los Angeles, but they're literally at the bottom of a valley right now. They have nowhere to go but up. They have so much potential with this roster, and nobody expects anything from them currently. So I think that they're at the top. They're at the bottom of a valley right now. They completely screwed the pooch last season. Um, they weren't. Wait, they were the absolute worst. They were 12th, right?
Yeah, they were
Okay,
12th.
yes, I was pretty sure. I wasn't sure what happened at the end of champs, but I mean they were completely and utterly irrelevant the entire season. But I think you get a lot of good, fresh looks to the team. You pick up some really solid talent. Um, and like I said, right now they're at the bottom of the valley. They have literally nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, they have nowhere to go but up, or they could just stay at the bottom of that valley, which is very likely with this roster.
That's where they're at. That is where they're at.
Oh gosh, this is it's just so questionable. It worked for one event. They did well one event. They did well like two events in World War II. They had a good Seattle event,
Yeah, exactly.
but
Like, why try to
outside of
build
that
up
and
off of
champs,
EG whenever they literally showed up for champs? They were like, all right, we're gonna move in rent free in everybody's head. Everybody's gonna wonder how in the hell Aches pulled this off.
yeah.
I don't know. It was just, yeah. Like I said, they're in the valley. They're in the valley. We'll see. We'll see where they go.
All right. Well, starting with our other Valley Boy team, we got the LA Thieves, and I'll let you kick. Oh! I gotta say the roster first. My
Oh
bad.
yeah.
We got TJ Haley. Kenny is back. No more
Yep.
Quavo. Praise be to God.
Yeah.
We
No.
got
Quavo was sick.
Slasher and Temp, substitute Draza, and Coach J Cap. Whoop whoop.
Yeah.
So excited. Oak Boys. Yeah. All right.
Well,
Um,
also Mud Dog's there. Also Enables there. Also Nade
oh
Shots
my
there.
gosh. Nate
Um,
Shot's not an Oak Boy, please.
no,
No.
he's not an Oak Boy, but I mean, like they have lots and lots
It
of Call of
like
Duty
it
history.
kills me. I feel like I'm getting stabbed in the chest every time I utter those words from my
The
mouth.
Oak Boy.
All right. Well, what is the word you used to describe this 100 Thieves, this
Um,
LA Thieves lineup?
so originally I had one word, but since you broke the rules, I figured I would do that too.
Yeah, it's
So,
fine. Go for it.
I used two words: fresh look. I think that this is going to be I think this is going to be a big confidence booster for these guys. Um, it didn't sit right with anybody that they had Optic. Like nobody liked that they were the OGLA roster. Nobody. Not even the most diehard Optic fans. Most of the diehard Optic fans were like, "Yeah, but the Huntsman though, like that's where the real Optic is." So it's gonna be nice to have a clean, fresh look with an organization that really cares about their players and has a short but successful history in Call of Duty. 100 Thieves competed in Black Ops 4 and did phenomenal. They were lights out. They started off a little rough, but they were a dominant team by the end of the season. Um, and now we're gonna see the LA Thieves after a season break from Modern Warfare, and due to like some business moves made by Hector and Matt Haig. That being said, I think that I think that the Steve's roster is exciting, and I think that this is a good fresh look. I think that they can get a reset, and I believe that there's going to be enough eyes on them that some of the problems with torching and not showing to practice and just general overall like disposition, I think a lot of that goes away. Just because, I mean, if I was on that roster, I'd be hype. I'd be so amped to be part of 100 Thieves, a very successful organization, probably one of the most successful organizations in esports. Um, and they're just they're just lights out.
Yeah, they got that new hair, that fresh new haircut,
Mm-hmm.
some new clothes. They're
Mm-hmm.
looking good.
From the
So
hoodie
I
org.
decided to go with proving time. This
Okay.
is their proving time, especially for the fourth man on this roster in Temp. Temp's been on some incredibly strong lineups, like 3, 4 years in a row, and has failed to capitalize on it each and every time. And I don't think Temp's a bad player. I think he's a phenomenal player. But the teams he has been on has failed to capitalize every single year. Now he's on a roster with Slasher once again, there's Kenny, and there's TJ Haley. TJ had an awful season last season. Pretty much everyone did on this lineup outside of Slasher. Kenny showed up in Texas, but this is kind of proving time for this roster. If this roster fails to perform, I do not see Temp and TJ being highly valued players at all.
Right.
In the coming seasons. And with JCap as a coach, I don't see that helping this team all that much. As we've kind of said already, Slasher's pretty much a player coach who has terrible communication skills. So I don't see JCap being able to kind of communicate what Slasher's trying to say to Temp, Kenny, or TJ all that effectively. Kenny probably understands. TJ and Temp, maybe not so much. And so we're like, this is proving time for this lineup. Like, they have a good roster on paper. It looks solid. If you look at these players outside of that Modern Warfare season, they're in Texas. Like, they have everything kind of going for them into the season.
Mm-hmm.
If they fail to show up and fail to perform at a top tier throughout the entire season, then their future is not looking bright.
Yeah, I would imagine that we'll probably see some new rookies in the league if LA Thieves don't start picking up immediately, especially TJ and Tim. I think that those guys have the most pressure on them to perform. I know that Slasher is part of a winning formula. Kenny's in it for the shoes. I just know it. Like, he loves those Jordans that Nade Shot gave him. He's in it for the shoes again. He's like, all right, we gotta do well. We gotta go to champs so I can get another pair of fresh Jordans from Daddy Nade. So I think that he's going to do really well this season.
I wish there were live events.
Oh yeah,
do it for the shoes.
Do it for the shoes. Yeah, just a hoodie org, right?
Yeah, I mean, sell hoodies, win championships.
Sell hoodies, win championships. I really do think that this is going to be a good roster. I'm really excited for the Thieves. So.
Yeah, we will have to see.
Oh, and I guess now that we're really talking CDL again, I will say now as a disclaimer, I am incredibly biased towards the LA Thieves. I love 100 Ds. They're probably my favorite org at this point. Love everything that they've done. They're super successful, and I'm really looking for this roster to do some good stuff this year. So, disclaimer, I'm biased.
Well, you're biased towards 100 team. I'm biased towards game 5s. I want some game 5s. I want all the game 5s. Every series, game 5. Let's go. Broadcast will hate me, but I don't care. Moving on, we're going to talk about the Minnesota Rockers lineup. We got Attached, Major Maniac, Priesta, and Accuracy with Coach Saint. All right, so what do you got for this roster?
I'm going to break the rules again. 3 words. Chip on shoulder. All these guys came from different rosters. None of these guys played on Minnesota last season. They were all dropped by their respective teams.
2 from FaZe, 2 from New York.
Yes. So what this tells me is that these guys are going to come out. They've got a lot to prove. Minnesota itself was doing great last year at LAN. And then when we went to online, everything sort of fell apart for them. So not only are they pretty upset that their bar was really high in the beginning and it just completely fell off as soon as they went to online, but the other thing that's going to weigh on these guys is the fact that they were dropped by good orgs. They were good players. They are good players. All of these guys are phenomenal. And now that they're on Minnesota, I would imagine that they're like, all right, well, let's just make this happen. We got a big chip on our shoulder, and we're going to go out there and give them hell.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And that can definitely be a driving force for them kind of throughout the season.
True.
So maybe proving time would have been a word for the Rocker, but I decided to go with balanced. I think this is an incredibly balanced lineup. You have Accuracy, who's a solid leader and AR. You have Attach and Priesta, who are good, fast SMG players, but also good flex players. And then you got Major Maniac, who's an incredible flex player in his own right. And so he's kind of the focal point for this team, being able to balance those fast, aggressive subs in Attach and Priesta and the slower AR player in Accuracy. And I think they have a very good depth of kind of flexibility within this roster outside of accuracy to kind of fill in whatever pacing gaps there might be.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this can be an incredibly balanced roster if they kind of find their form throughout the year.
Yeah, and fortunately, the meta's kind of gone in a direction that this has really blessed the rocker. Like, I mean, these guys are in perfect positions right now. The 74U is an amazing submachine gun. The ARs, like, one guy needs to play a lot slower than traditionally, and then you have that flex AR that kind of has to be the glue. And I think that Major Maniac can play that role. I think Accuracy is a great main AR who plays slow and just holds a lane down. And attach and Priesta. I mean, Priesta will literally do whatever you want him to do. You want him to get on the hill, he's on the hill. You want him to hit the flank, he's on the flank. With Priesta and Major Maniac coming from FaZe, I think that they're going to bring a lot of really unique looks to the table. And attach and Accuracy are just, I mean, all these guys are vets. Like, they've been in the league all of them have been in the league for quite some time aside from Priesta. But I mean, yeah, this roster it has the potential, but they need to focus on the fact that they've got a big chip on their shoulder and they need to prove themselves.
Yeah, I think the one thing with Minnesota that could bite them is just pacing. I think that's like the only thing I'm worried about with this lineup is just pacing. Simply because you have accuracy on this lineup, and you have Major Maniac and Priester. We're coming from an incredibly fast and aggressive FaZe team, so they might have a little bit of a learning curve, kind of readjusting to maybe a bit of a slower play style. But that was the rocker lineup. We're going to move on to the New York Subliners with a roster of Zuma, Mac, Clayster, and Hydra. Substitute Asim, who looks like he may be starting for them potentially simply because of visa issues, getting Hydra into the States. And they got Coach Revan. So for me, this is a bit of a weird one. I went with family quarrels.
What?
So you got Zuma and Clayster. Clayster's like the mom of the team. Zuma's like the dad. They are going to bicker quite a lot, I feel. Maybe friendly bickering, some not so friendly bickering. Then you have Mac, who is their son, and you either have Hydra or Asim as their adopted second kid. And if the family can kind of get along, I think this team's going to do well. If this family cannot get along, then chaos is going to ensue. That is kind of my view of this Subliners roster currently.
Right. Question: what drugs are you on? Like, just if you could just give me a list, DM them to me, that would be awesome because I want what you're on. That just seems like such a what. When did you think of that? Were you in like the shower and you were like, family quarrels? Yeah, that's a great way to describe the Subliners roster. Like, what's going on, Nick?
I was really pressing to kind of think of what I could go with for the Subliners, and I was like, you know what, I could see some little infighting in this roster. I could see Clayster's kind of the mama figure on teams.
It is Mama Clay for sure. My word for the Subliners is underrated. I think that last year they were potentially overrated in the beginning. Made some changes, picked up Mac Melts, and did fine, right? They were a pretty solid team. Then they moved some stuff around to get rid of accuracy, and then we make the cut down to 5, or to cut down to 4. Pick up Clayster. So yeah, I think that underrated is going to be the buzzword. Everybody's been focusing on Atlanta, Dallas, Optic, LA Thieves. Everybody's like, oh yeah, these are going to be the dominant rosters. Honestly, the Subliners have a chance to take this all the way. They really do. And it comes down to Clayster for the most part. I mean, he's already the back-to-back champ. There's not many in COD that are as successful as him, consistently successful.
If Clayster wins a championship with this lineup, because it's a lot lower, I think, skill level than prior lineups that he's been on that have won a world championship. Like, just kind of looking at the names and kind of the roster. I mean, you had Shotzi and Illy. I would say they were already pretty darn proven.
Right.
Not like they were risks. 100% they were risks. But I feel like for me, I had a little more faith in them than maybe I do in kind of Hydra coming in to this roster, or if they were to bring ASIM in as their substitute. Obviously, they want Hydra full time, most likely, but the rookies that Clayster has had on his roster in the past and won world championships with in the past, I look at them and then I kind of look at the two younger players on this, and there's a pretty big skill gap, I feel, between them.
Yeah, I I have to concede that point for sure. Um, who knows? I really do. I really do believe in this roster, and
Yeah, it's certainly going to be well, you said underrated, but a bit of an they're definitely underdogs
they are
this
underdogs.
season.
And then nobody talks about the subliners right now, and I think that's going to change very quickly into the season as they start to turn heads. I think this is a perfect COD for Clayster to just go off because there's that really slow AR role that he loves to play. There's not a lot of places you can fall off on the map, which is also a really good thing for Clayster.
He's managed to fall off already.
That's true. I
He
mean,
fell off on Raid.
I was about to say Raid came back and it's haunting him. I'm sure. Um, he's like that water. Anyway, yeah, like I said, this subliners roster, mark my words, this is a great time in the preseason to say this is gonna be a good team, and people are sleeping on them.
All right, I like it. Well, we only got 3 rosters left, and this one is a bit of a doozy. All right, it is the Paris Legion. They finally announced their roster. I'm sorry, Classic, I forgot you were the 4th. I don't know how, seeing as how you're one of the better players on this lineup.
Yeah,
Paris
true.
Legion lineup is Scraps, Classic, Aqua, and Fire, with Coach Theory. So what do you use? Actually, I'll go first with this.
Yeah, go for it.
So my one word to describe this Paris Legion lineup is Scraps. And this is a play on words. Not only because they have scraps, but these are all the leftover scraps that no one wanted. And they just decided to pick them up and throw them together into a team because they did not want to spend more than a minimum amount of money, and these were all the leftovers.
Quick sidebar: if you guys haven't liked and subscribed to this shit show, well, look what you're missing out on.
Great puns.
God. Oh man, honestly, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on the Paris Legion, and my one word for them is rushed. They put this roster together because they realized that they have to. The CDL was probably like, you're contractually obliged to participate this season, and they were like, but we don't wanna. And CDL came down on them, was probably like, tough shit. So now they got the scraps of the CDL. They have no preparation whatsoever. They are doomed to have another repeat of last season, which is just mediocrity. We're going to see flashes of greatness here and there. They might win some games that they shouldn't have at time or two, but for the most part, this roster is rushed, and it seems like there was really not a lot of thought into it.
Yep. Well, now that we got that disappointment out of the way, let's move on to the Seattle Surge, who could very well disappoint me this season. Hopefully they don't. They have a lineup of Octane, Gunless, Pristini, and Looney with Coach Nubsy. So I'll let you start this one off.
My one word, chemistry. I think that if they can get the chemistry down, this roster can be great. They have really good players on this team now. It's different than last year. They started off with like Daddy App, and who was having a kid at the time, Enable, who isn't even playing COD anymore, Octane, who was the only viable option on the team, the only one who stuck around to this season, and I can't even remember who the 4th was. But it wasn't. It was completely irrelevant because the roster last year couldn't find their footing. They couldn't find the chemistry. They couldn't find anything. They couldn't figure out how to work around Octane. So this year, that's the big focus. Has to be. They have to figure out how to vibe well together. Otherwise, guess what? Repeat.
Yep. I really don't want to see an 11th place repeat from this Seattle Surge lineup. So the word I decided to go with was load bearing. And the player for this word specifically is Pristini. Pristini is going to carry the load of this team's season on his back. If he cannot perform in the role he is assigned and wants to play within this roster, this team will fail. There's no doubt in my mind that Pristini is the key to this team's success. You know what you're getting out of Octane, Gunless, and Looney. And if Pristini cannot fulfill his duty within this roster, they will break. He is bearing the load of Seattle Surge's entire 2021 season on his shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think it does come down to Pristini. I think he will be the linchpin for this roster. And, um, I think he did fine in Florida for the little bit that he was there with them. They turned some heads. I think he did fine while he was with Optic. He didn't perform as well as they would have liked, but they were a good team. It sucks that he was the fifth man out. We'll see how well he can perform without his brother Arcides again, because I knew that was a strain on his mental health. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions, and I think a lot of them get answered once they start to figure out how to play together as a team.
Yeah. So a lot of eyes, my eyes especially, are on the Seattle Surge once the season starts up.
Right.
But now we are at the end. We have the last team here. We have the Toronto Ultra with the lineup of Cammy, Kleenex, Methods, and Bance. Substitute Insight coach Marky B with the beautiful suitcase of goodies to help his team out at events. So for this roster, I went with the word unassuming. I think this is probably the most dark horse team we could have, because you look at this lineup and you're like, yeah, that's a team. And that's kind of really all you think. But I think this, like we saw it last year with Toronto Ultra, they turned some heads towards the end of the season. They showed up. And I think that could be something we kind of see again with this lineup here.
Yeah, absolutely. We definitely can. My word for them, very similar as underdogs. They're going to come into this league, and people are going to treat them like, oh, well, it's just the Ultra. They're going to try to figure it out. They're not the same team as they were in the beginning of the season last year. Beginning of the season last year, they had 10 people on the roster, and they were trying to cut down to 5 and trying to figure out who worked the best with who. Now they have that. They proved that in Champs. They did phenomenal in Champs, in my opinion. They performed way better than expected. And because of that...
Interesting factoid, too.
Oh, yeah.
Toronto Ultra is the only roster not to make a roster change.
That you know what?
Outside of Dallas Empire.
Right, yeah, but I get that. Yeah, so, I mean, Dallas and Toronto are the two teams that they felt pretty good about where they were at. Cutting down a guy. It's probably a little bit harder for Dallas than it was Toronto. But, I mean... Toronto is going to come in here and start turning heads right away. I think that this is going to be another great game. I think that they're going to be S&D stars all season. This is just I like with Cammy using the sniper, with Methods as an AR. This is going to be a pretty devastating roster. Like I think that they're gonna come in the league and start messing with people. So I'm really excited to see how well this Toronto Ultra roster plays.
Yeah, it definitely should be incredibly interesting, simply because of kind of how long, they're one of the rosters not making a change.
Right.
And you look at them and you're like, oh yeah, they're probably going to be okay, but they could. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I really want this season to start just to see kind of like what's actually gonna be going on
soon,
kind of
Nick.
throughout the year.
Soon. Very
so
soon.
soon.
I know.
All right.
I'm excited.
But now we're going to give our rankings for the team. We're going to put them into some categories. And maybe we'll do a different prediction. I don't know. I don't know if we'll do predictions on where we'll think they'll end up by the end of the season place-wise. I think we'll just, for now, we'll see where things go. But for now, we'll put them in rankings S through E, and we'll go from top to bottom, since I think the top teams are a lot more clear-cut than when we start to get back into that soup. We're going to have more soup this season. Oh, joy.
Oh, joy.
The soup returns. What soup do you want this season? I myself could go for maybe some lobster bisque. That would
Well,
be.
you're a little bougie, but I was gonna go with some like alphabet soup because we're about to talk about some letters.
Oh, I like it. I
So
like it. All right.
I think we should just start off with our S tier, right? I mean, just go ahead and get it out of the way because I'm sure that we have pretty similar S tiers. I have three teams in S tier: Atlanta, Dallas, and Optic. Actually, um, so I mean, I don't have to say anything about Dallas or Atlanta. Dallas is the returning champs. Atlanta literally blew the doors off of everybody the entire season, and I mean, aside from like a weird finish to the season with a kind of a disappointing grand finals and champs, they were lights out. So I think that they returned to form, and I think that Chicago has the like I'm putting them at S tier right now just because they are a very solid team, and I think returning to 4v4 COD will allow them to kind of round out their roster a little bit better and stick to some better like some more concrete roles. Um, so so I'm putting Optic in S tier right now. But I mean they're like the low S tier if that makes sense. They're not double S tier. They're just S tier. You know.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, I decided to go with only FaZe and Dallas in the S tier for now. I've been watching a lot of scrims. Obviously, I think only a couple teams stream their scrims.
Mhm.
Mostly it's Chicago
Chicago. Yeah.
and New York.
Yep.
Also with Clayster, he streams his a decent amount. But those are, I think, the only two teams that are streaming their scrims currently. Um, and I'm not basing this off their scrims because their scrims have been going quite well. There's some days where they're flopping, some days where they're on fire. Um, for me, this is just more of kind of like where we saw these teams end up last season and where they're coming into this season. Obviously, the rosters are different. We're moving from 5v5 to 4v4, but I just have a little more faith in the Atlanta FaZe and Dallas Empire as of right now to be in that S tier. And so I'm going to put Chicago Optic into my A tier along the side of the LA Thieves. Those are going to be my two A tier teams.
See, sorry. Let's see. I have one, two, three A tier teams. The teams being LA Thieves, Subliners, and Toronto Ultra. So I think all of these guys they deserve to be in that A tier spot right now. I think all of them are vying for some of those top, maybe like going into S tier spots. You know, they just need a little bit of they need to prove themselves in the season, obviously. But I think that all three of them come out and they're gonna be top contenders. They're gonna be at the top of the soup. So I guess we could just move on to B team unless you got any more talking points for A team.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I feel like I don't want to put a lot of these teams in the same tier because I mean realistically you could put probably six of these teams in the same, maybe eight of them in the same tier. I think your clear front runners, or I guess the ones at least by name that are front runners, you got FaZe, Chicago, Dallas, 100 Thieves, and then you could probably throw New York in the mix there as well. That are like people's clear front runners. I don't really have New York there yet. I probably would put them more so in the soup. And so that's where I do have them. I have New York as a B tier team currently, alongside the Florida Mutineers, the Seattle Surge, and the Toronto Ultra. So that's kind of making up the middle of my pack. And so even lower in my C tier, I have the London Royal Ravens and the Minnesota Rocker. Maybe a little bit surprising to see them all the way down there in my C tier. I think the Rocker, they're going to kind of struggle early on before coming into their own. I don't think they're
right.
going to start out the season hot as kind of they did in the prior season. I think they're going to have a much more underwhelming start to the season, and then they'll start to kind of pick it up as the season goes on. And as we kind of said, this London Royal Ravens roster, at least in my opinion, it's incredibly kind of safe and so reserved, and so they're just going to be kind of middle of the pack throughout the whole season. I don't really see them winning any championships throughout the season. I kind of just see them ending up in probably anywhere between 10th through 6th for the
Yeah.
majority of the season.
I guess I can go with my B and C tiers. Because that rounds out everybody except for one team. So my B tier, I have the Rocker and Seattle Surge. I think that both of them are, like I said, kind of the top of the soup, but there's still a lot of question marks surrounding both of those rosters. I think the Rocker is probably slightly better than the Surge. Um, and then my C team or my C tiers are Florida Mutineers. Just because of Barrow and everything like that. Um, Royal
Yeah, I'm
Ravens.
actually surprised you have the Florida Mutineers all the way down in C tier.
You know what? Like I said, I love the Mutineers and everything like that. I just think that like this kind of loss is going to weigh on them, and I don't think it's
We
going to have
did
the
see
Kobe
them
effect either.
compete. We did see this Florida Mutineers lineup compete in the Faro Throwback Tournament or
Yeah,
the
but
Faro Memorial
I
Tournament.
literally don't put any stock into that because I mean those like the guns were radically different then.
Yeah,
they've
just
already
too
changed a
too much
bunch
of
of
a
stuff.
difference.
It's just there's so much that's already already changed over that time that I mean there's no way you can say oh yeah well based on the tournament before season one whenever all the guns were still kind of out of balance and the GAs and the bannings were not consistent or anything like that. I don't even think they were using streaks then. So like I mean the balance of the game is just so much different already. So I'll put them at C tier along with the Ravens and LAG. Just because I think that there's only one team in my mind that hasn't been prepping for the CDL, and if you've been prepping at all, I feel like you at least deserve to pass in my mind. Um, but if you wanna talk about your D and you have an E tier team,
Yeah, I
wow.
went all the way to the end. So my D tier team is the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and then I have the Paris Legion at E
E.
because I think even as bad as the Guerrillas roster is, it's not as bad as the Paris Legion one, which just is atrocious.
I guess I was
Absolutely atrocious.
I guess I was just too nice with my rankings. I have a Legion D. I don't have an E tier team just because I mean
I
like
mean, they are still the bottom of the pack for you. I
right.
think you just have a little more concentrated soup than I do.
I mean putting three teams in S tier right now is probably a little ambitious, but I mean we'll see. We'll see as the season unfolds. I think that the top three are front runners, and we'll see how well they perform moving forward.
Yeah, I think who from the A tier, I guess, do you think will be the next one to claim an S tier spot, and maybe who do you think they'll bump out of an S tier spot?
So I think that the team that has the highest likelihood to move into that top tier position is probably the subliners in my eyes. I think that they are pretty dominant. I see the vision in the team. I see that the chemistry's already going well with the scrims, and I mean, if anybody's gonna figure out how to make it work, it's Clayster. Um, so I think that the subliners could push them out, and honestly, I think that the Dallas Empire. This is gonna sound crazy, but I think the Dallas Empire are the ones they're gonna live and die by the sword, and we'll see how well they play moving into the season. I think that they might be the team that I would see kind of fall out of favor. I don't see FaZe doing it. And Chicago or Optic, I mean, they always manage to figure it out. It always seems like Optic figures out how to make a T4 finish, with the exception of World War II. Um, but I mean, they're a long-standing enough franchise that I think they have a really solid roster. I don't think that they're going to move out of S tier before Dallas. That makes sense.
Okay, that's probably a little bit surprising, I would say.
I'd hope so. I hope
Okay,
I get
it's
roasted
very
in the comments.
surprising. I'm very surprised that you would say Dallas over Chicago would be the one to leave. But I think it's maybe a bit more of kind of like that known factor with the Dallas Empire, since they haven't really moved too many pieces around, as where the likes of Chicago, even though they're kind of core three is still the same. It feels like they've made some massive changes to their roster.
It definitely feels like a new team for sure.
And new name, new team.
It's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be a great season.
February cannot come fast enough, but
Facts. Well,
that is our ratings for the teams currently
true.
that we do have. We'll have to see how things round out at the first event that we do have. Should be very exciting to see some of those matchups unfold. Fortunately, it has not been announced yet, but what has been announced is the third and fourth Challenger Cup. Those will be taking, and I believe those will be taking place in, I believe, 2 weeks and 3 weeks, respectively, from kind of the first weekend of this new year. So happy new year to kind of everyone. Thank
Right.
you. If you've been with us for a year, congratulations. You made it.
You made
You
it to the
probably
next
hate
year.
yourself for it, but we love you for it.
We do. Much
And
love.
that is going to be it from us for this episode. You got anything else to say?
I'm gonna do a quick plug. CCL, we're already in the preseason. We start tonight actually. But if you guys want to watch some Comp COD and you like college sports, I'm gonna go ahead and plug the College COD League. We also start in February for the regular season. So if you guys are interested in that, please go out and support your local college. Hopefully they have a team. If not, I'm sure that there's a college around you that has a team. There's a lot of teams coming in this in the league, and it's gonna be really exciting this year. Maybe not as exciting as a CDL, but you know what? I beg to differ a little bit too. I think that college COD is fun in its own right.
Yeah, it's always fun kind of seeing some crazy college kids go at each other. But that's going to be it from us. I'll put all the info regarding the CCL down in the description down below.
Let's
So if you're interested, you
go.
can check that out there. That is it from us. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year. That's it from us for this episode. And we will see you guys next time.
Peace.